Okay, kia ora whānau. Hey, thank you so much for making time to attend this webinar. It's a real privilege to be in this space to share some of my experiences around identity and culture and navigating these very important parts of our well-being. I just want to also acknowledge that there's some pretty hectic stuff happening in Tamaki Makaurau this morning. Some of that is quite unsettling for all of us over the motu. So want to keep that in mind as well, and hope you're all safe and taking care. Before we get into it any further, we'll open with karakia, and we'll go from there. Okay, ke inoi tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai. E hia ki ana, kia tākura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Awesome. So just to recap, I'm not sure who is here today and if you were here for the first session, but in the first session, I'll just give a bit of an overview around what we had a kōrero about. We talked about kōwaio, so who am I? Who are we? A very important question. And how have I navigated towards standing in my own identity? Mostly on the cultural side, but very much on the holistic side as well. So these are very much from my own experiences. We all have different stories to tell, but just speaking authentically from mine. One thing that I touched on at the beginning in the last session was that for Māori, research has shown us that a strong cultural identity is associated with improved well-being and reduced serious depressive symptoms. So just from that alone, having a very strong and affirmed identity is critical for our mental health outcomes. That research goes on to say that we must support the continued reclamation of traditional Māori knowledge and practices to heal, connect, and give meaning. From my own experiences, having an affirmed identity as Māori, also in other spaces of culture, ethnicity, spirituality, gender, sexuality, all of these things have been critical for knowing who I am, where I stand, and where I am going. One of my slides, which I decided to chuck in at the last minute, was the thing around being plastic when we're navigating identity and who we are. It's something that I used to say about myself, that I'm a plastic Māori or plastic Samoan. I'll never, even like saying it now, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. I'll never say it again. And I remember a defining moment a few years ago where one of my friends quoted another person as "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." And so while we're all on this journey of reclamation and growing, you know, we're all wanting to do better. We're all wanting to step into a space where we're more affirmed in who we are. You know, our experiences are authentic, and I'm pushing back against the notion of any of us being plastic. So here's a few of my precious moments that I wanted to share with you all from my land up north in Pangaru, some of my whānau in Samoa, in different spaces, me on my dad's shoulders in the bottom right-hand corner. So all of these are important because this is my whānau, this is my whakapapa, and this is at the core of everything that I have the opportunity to do now and into the future. I also introduced the metaphor, I guess, of how I see my journey, and I shared that a few years ago I had the humbling opportunity to sail on the Va'a Ngaulofa in Samoa. I was living in Samoa at the time. I got horrendously seasick. There's a whole nother story, but it was a very kind of like literal experience of learning how to navigate, but also connected to a metaphor of, you know, voyaging and where are we going and where have we come from. And that's really resonated with me over, that was in 2019, like through the experience of COVID, some really hard times, some choppy seas, if you look at it in that way. And so I put this in the last presentation. It was really interesting. The other day, I was in a bookshop, and it's not a new book, but I started reading this book. Well, we can't really see, but Wayfinding Leadership: Groundbreaking Wisdom for Developing Leaders. And so, a lot of what I was talking about when I'm reading in the book, it's really adding a whole lot of layer and authenticity to what I had been putting forward in my kōrero. So that was very interesting. It's uncanny, these things. So how I see my journey, I'm drawing and learning about my whakapapa. There's a lot that I know now that I didn't know before. There's more that I'm continuing to connect with. I'm thinking about how can I make impact and legacy. You know, what is the difference that I want to make in the world, or in my whānau, or with my friends, in the environment? What does that look like? I have a past. I stand in the present, and I look to the future in a way that's very continuous, right? It's not so fragmented into those three different spaces, but I stand in the past, the present, and the future. Something that I've tried not to become too preoccupied with is the future. Like, often thinking about, where am I going? What am I doing? We can sometimes find ourselves resting heavily in one of these three spaces. But I try as much as possible, acknowledging that I am human, to be in all of those spaces, acknowledging my whakapapa, looking to the future, standing in the moment. So have a think for yourself. What is your destination? You know, what is the thing that you are striving towards? What is it that you stand within? Experience, whakapapa. Where are you at today? What do you have to be grateful for? What can you celebrate? What are you continuing to strengthen? And what is the place that you want to arrive at, or even one of the places? So for today's lunchtime session, I'm going to introduce two models, which many of you would have heard of before, especially if you work in the social services. And just for me, like, no matter how many times I've heard of these models or people have talked about them, I still find so much relevance in them. So I think, you know, we may be experts in these, and some of you may know them more than I do. But what they mean to each of us is beautifully unique. And I think it's always good to kind of pause, take stock, reflect, and see, you know, what do things look like for us? Okay, so we'll start off with Te Whare Tapa Whā. This model, as many of us will know, was designed by leading Māori health advocate Sir Mason Drury in 1984. The model describes health and well-being as a wharenui, or a meeting house with 4 walls. The first of these walls is Te Taha Whānau, those around us that give us aroha and awhi. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your whānau or your family in a conservative sense, like mum, dad, kids, that sort of thing. It can be whoever you choose to be in your whānau. It may be close friends. It may be people that you see every day. It may be people that you see once a year. But who are your number one supporters? Who is your inner circle, the people that have your back? Te taha tinana, how our body feels and how we care for it. So this can look different for each of us. How do we nourish our tinana? How do we strengthen it? Maybe going for a walk, or maybe going to the gym. It may be getting out on the water. It may be our diet. It really depends. Te taha hininaro, so stimulating and refreshing our heart, our emotions, our feelings, our mind. How do we nourish that part of our hauora? And te taha wairoa, being present, taking notice, and spiritual connection. So that, again, can look totally different to each of us. It may be in the form of like organized religion and place of worship. It may not, but having that kind of that presence, being aware and connected in a way that's special to us. So I'll just highlight what this means to me, and obviously it's just my story, and we'll all have our own interpretation of what this will look like for each of us. But for my wharenui, and when I look at Te Taha Wairoa and my spiritual well-being, I'm often looking to spending time in nature. So that might be at the beach, going into the forest. My job, my career is very outward. So I'm often speaking and at hui, talking about very critical issues, and it takes a lot of energy. I love the mahi, but I do need time for solitude and reflection, and that's often away from other people. Even if it's just like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I need that space to recharge. And how we do that, how each of us do that will be totally different. Maybe that kind of blurs into the extrovert, introvert type kōrero. For my tinana, I try as much as possible to go to the gym. Still working on it at this point in time. I try to get outdoors as much as possible, going for a walk, going for a run, setting goals. So I did the Rosaroa marathon earlier in the year, sorry, half marathon, I need to be honest. Whenua, spending time up north in Pangaru. I try as much as possible to go there at least once or twice a year. Over New Year's, I had the opportunity to go back to Samoa after 3 years, having lived there for 5 years before that, and going to Australia. So my mum is Australian Pākehā. I think going back to Australia is very nostalgic for me. I remember my grandparents, the stories, the laughs, the food. And so going back to Australia, it brings back a lot of precious childhood memories. And so I really enjoy that. Te taha whānau, storytelling, having kai, sharing food, laughing, offering support. It's not always fun and games. Like sometimes we really need each other. Like I need my whānau, they need me. And so that's what it looks like in that dimension for me. And te taha hine naro, so being a registered social worker and a addiction practitioner, I need to make a commitment to my profession, professional development. EAP, I guess that connects very much to this mahi, Ignite. Sometimes we need to talk to somebody, and I've done that as well, regardless, there are always times where we need the advice and support of another person that can see things from another perspective. And for me, as well as a registered professional, engaging in supervision. There's obviously a real interplay between these things. So you can't really separate, like, this is spirituality, this is our tinana, our physical health, but these are all very much connected. So, when we talk about that, or when I talk about the outdoors as being part of my, tinana, it's also connected to my version of Te Taha Wairoa. So there's a real strong connection between all of these elements. I also wanted to touch on a story, some experience that I had last year, where my physical health was not as good as it could have been because I injured myself through CrossFit. And it was through that experience that I wasn't able to go to the gym. I couldn't really get outdoors. I had to take some time off work because I did a pretty good job of the injury. Had to go to physio. And so for a moment, it was really hard to nourish my tinana as well as I wanted to. But gladly, I felt pretty strong in those other elements. I had my whānau around me. I had been on holiday to go up north. I felt pretty strong in my hinengaro and spiritual well-being. And while it was a stretch on those things, because the other walls of my whare nui, were strong, I had some reserve to build up and re-strengthen my tinana. So I think that's an important thought for us. We might not be strong in every area. Sometimes life happens. we're we're living life and we're going through things and it's not always smooth sailing. But what are the areas of our overall health that we can rely on? What are our strongest points and where might we need to dedicate some resource to further strengthening? So I'd like us just to take a moment to pause and reflect and have a think about what does this look like for you? Whether you're learning about the model for the first time, whether you know it very well, just have a think about what do you do to nourish your wairoa, your spiritual well-being. What does caring for your tinana look like? Does that look like going to the gym, going for a walk, getting a massage, romi romi? What does it look like for you? Also, what could it look like for you? I'd love to get a massage right now, actually, thinking about it. Whenua, what opportunity do you have to connect with your land, your place of standing, your roots, the environment, the earth, water? Who is in your whānau? Who adds life constructively or positively? How do you define your whānau? And how do you build up your hinenaro, your knowledge, learning new things, different perspectives, and your emotional and mental well-being and resilience? Okay, so I'm going to quickly shift tack and talk about Fono Fale. This is a very, I guess, for me, as I learn about my place of standing as Samoan and Māori and Australian Pākehā, is a very hectic fruit salad. But, you know, these are two models that really resonate with me. Fono Fale is seen as often seen as the benchmark Pacific model of mental health, and is one of the most known ones in our context. The elements are physical, spiritual, and mental dimensions can be, from my perspective, similar to tinana, wairoa, and hinenaro. How we kind of construct understanding and how we view these things is very personal and up to us, but that's from my authentic experience. The other pillars for me open up the other pillar for me opens up the possibility of other realms of strength and security that are also unique to each of us, and there's no real right or wrong in that space either. For this model, a family is at the foundation, and that plays a critical in the stability of the whare. Okay, so the po are each embedded within the foundation, which is family. But again, how we articulate family, like whānau, is completely up to us. A unique element of this is that of context, time, and environment. Also acknowledging who developed this model, which I don't have skipped at the beginning, but developed by a whionga Fuimano Kaupolotu Enderman in 1984. Time refers to the actual time or a specific time in history. Environment, our relationship to the environment. It can also include rural and urban context. In context, I'm kind of blurring over, but that's, I guess, what happens. We can't segment all of these as clearly as sometimes we would like to, maybe. So where, how, what are we born in the Pacific? Are we born in Aotearoa? Are we raised in Aotearoa? What is our residency, our legal status, political and socioeconomic influences? All of these things surround the Fono Fale. So from my perspective of how I'm viewing time at the moment, it's 2023. It's an election year, which has a impact on certain things, certain spaces that I am in, that I work in. Kind of like wondering what direction is the ship going to take from here. So that's in the context. Also in the context is that I'm Australian born. I've lived in the Pacific for a number of years, but right now I'm New Zealand based. I come from a multicultural, multi-generational trans-Tasman whānau, even more than trans-Tasman, but just to try and keep it relatively simple. And so that's at the foundation for me. Added to that is my beautiful friends, my people that have my back. All those people provide and create a very solid foundation for me. And environment, I'm urban based and trying as much as possible to keep connected to whenua. Obviously not going back to Samoa as I would like because the airfares are crazy expensive right now, but doing what I can when I can. So again, have a think about what does this mean for you in looking to reground your identity and your holistic well-being. I think this kind of overlays the two different perspectives that I've talked about today quite nicely. We have to acknowledge the context, the time, the environment that we're in. We don't always have control over those things. Sometimes it's the reality of our circumstances. I think that comes with like kindness and gratitude at the same time, balancing those thoughts within us. And as I kind of navigate towards the end of this webinar, and I'll give some space for any questions or thoughts, returning to this initial metaphor that I put forward at the beginning. So some examples of my journey of strengthening hinengaro, whenua, tinana, and wairoa, and what makes sense to me. At the beginning, I was raised only speaking English, te reo Pākehā. I've almost always been urban-based. I was often unfit and had an unfocused diet. And I was terrified of public speaking. Like I used to, that's a whole nother story, but I've somehow created a career where my whole career is public speaking. So it's pretty interesting, but I feel confident in this space now. And so I'm navigating towards reclaiming the taonga of my te reo. It's a work in progress and it will always be a work in progress, but I celebrate the commitment that I have made and where I'm at as being further ahead than where I had come from. I have plans to return to Pangaru, Samoa in Australia, hopefully next year, maybe later this year. We'll see how things go. I'm signing up at a new gym. I'm thinking about going back to wakaama. I try as much as possible to keep to a flexitarian diet, not eating as much meat and being mindful of what I put in my tinana, how I nourish my tinana, and pushing my comfort zone around public speaking, practicing, knowing that I sometimes make mistakes and being kind to myself, just like, we're all trying our best. We're doing what we can. And then thinking about my holistic health at the same time, how strong am I physically, spiritually, mentally? What are the things that I can control, that I can't control? The environment, the context, and time. So my hope for others in finding identity is just do what you can, take time to check in with your holistic health. Think about what are your areas of strength, those that you can rely on and celebrate those. With kindness, think about what areas may need strengthening. Find pride in what you are. Celebrate the journey, as I said, your story, your achievements, and look to the future with gentle ambition in balance with gratitude. Okay, whānau? So I hope that was helpful today. I've talked a lot, but if there's any questions out there, or if there's any knowledge that you'd like to share, then I open the floor. Kia ora. Thank you. Aki no tātou. Kia no, kia tau. Nā manakitanga a te mea naro. Ki ronga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te hua ma kihi. Kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tuturu ka whakamoa kia tina, huie, taike.
Yeah.